Welcome to Sacred Magic. Violet is on a quest to bring sacredness back into our everyday experiences. Anyone can have an extraordinary life when they are able to tap into their sacred magic within. Violet and her guests will be sharing their divine passions, inspirations, and stories of connecting with their sacred magic. We are so happy you have joined us today. Let's get started with your host, the magical creator of Discover Your Spiritual Gifts, Violet Rain.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sacred Magic Podcast. I'm your host, Violet Rain. And today my guest is Jessica Falcon, a formal attorney, lawyer turned mystic. Jessica is an international soul embodiment guide and divine feminine activator. She guides you to reclaim your divine power and sovereignty so you can experience true freedom. After leaving the legal profession in 2013 to embark on a spiritual pilgrimage, Jessica experienced an 8-year initiation into the divine feminine power. During this time, she spent years researching religious histories, ancient civilizations, and mythology. She's identified the core beliefs deeply embedded in the individual and collective psyche that keeps us from owning our power, speaking our truth, and liberating our sexuality. She hosts the Soul Sovereignty Sexuality Podcast. Her private and group portals of transformation are designed to help create a deep level of internal safety so you can fully be and express all of who you are. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, you're using some key words, so I'm interested in diving in because I talk a lot about sovereignty. So later we'll talk about what does that mean, because I find a lot of people don't understand the meaning of sovereignty. But before we dive into all of that, because I'm excited to chat with you, share with us a little bit what got you to do, like, why to leave the legal profession? What guided you on that path to be able to do this instead of that? I would love to know more about that.
Yeah, it definitely was not a mental decision. The mind resisted the soul calling for a long time. I enjoyed being a lawyer. I was a criminal prosecutor, and I loved standing in front of a jury and doing what I felt like was giving voice to people who didn't otherwise have a voice. I really loved that. Didn't love the system so much, but I loved the people that I worked with and what it took. And I had a series of what I'd call events that were really soul awakenings in disguise. But at the time, they just literally tumbled my world and forced me to question who I was, what I was doing, why I was doing it, what actually mattered to me, which began a journey into meditation, eventually into yoga, which is like a moving meditation to me. And ultimately, I felt the call to leave the profession deep inside and to go on a pilgrimage for at least 3 months. And it felt so insane to my rational mind that I just kept pushing it down and down and down until I felt like I was going crazy inside. I think we feel that when we have a soul calling that we ignore, right? Like we start to feel like we're going crazy. And even though everything in my world was seemingly perfect, right? My soul wasn't in alignment with the desire that was calling me, because my soul had another path that is clearly not the normal path, right? So I ultimately surrendered to the call and sold everything, left every belonging, every possession, quit my jobs, and just gave up my law license basically, and went on a pilgrimage, knowing a plan for 1 week in Europe. And a lot of it at the beginning was just being in the moment, being in pleasure, trusting my intuition, letting my body guide me, letting my body become my compass in a way that I'd never done before. I was scared to trust myself. I was scared to let my body guide me, right? We're all told that. And after a few months in that spiritual pilgrimage. I arrived on the mountain of La Sainte Bonne, which is a mountain dedicated to Mary Magdalene, where she allegedly lived for the last 30 years of her life. I had dreamt of the day I was supposed to arrive. It was either August 31st, September 1st, and then I kind of forgot about it. And I ended up arriving on September 1st. This is back in 2013. And as I was walking up the mountain, after a series of obstacles and tests getting there, I saw a man pass the trail in front of me, and a voice said, "He's your soulmate." And I was like, okay, first of all, I'm here for Magdalene. I'm not here for a man. And second, I have to see his eyes to know if he's my soulmate. And I just kind of cast it aside, kept walking up, went into the cave, had my experience there, up there for a couple of hours, picnicked. As I'm walking down the infamous 150 steps up to the cave, I turn my head and I see the same man coming down the steps behind me. Very long story short, he began to talk to me while we're going down the mountain. Months later, after him meeting me in various places where I'm traveling, I did actually see the light in his eyes when he took off his sunglasses. It was like the light. And we ended up moving in together. And right before that, I ended up making sure I had all of my ties in America released, canceled my return ticket. We move in together. And that's when I like to say the fairy tale turned into a nightmare that day, because suddenly I realized he'd been reading my journals. Suddenly I realized that everything about me threatened him because of his own insecurities and his own belief systems around women and around relationships and men in particular. And my power threatened him, my intelligence threatened him, and my sexuality threatened him, which I think a lot of women have experienced that. Right? And what it forced me to do is, even though I had been not only a criminal prosecutor, but a women's rights advocate for 10 years, even founded organizations against domestic violence and sexual assault, spoke at rallies, answered hotline calls, you name it, I found myself in the same position of apologizing for who I am, of denying my power, of feeling shame because I wasn't who he wanted me to be, and curling inward and getting smaller and smaller and smaller. My no wasn't honored. And it really had me look at the ways in which, even though my conscious mind was like, I am equal, I have a right to be here, my subconscious didn't feel that way. My soul had karma to heal. My soul had to look at the ways I had denied myself and sacrificed myself and separated from my truth that have been passed down to us for generations. I like to take it back to the belief systems that are encoded in the story of Adam and Eve, because those belief systems are a massive shift in history in which women were no longer recognized as equal to men because their soul was no longer recognized. And the divine was no longer recognized on earth because we only saw the divine up above in the sky. And the body was no longer recognized as holy because we weren't actually allowed to recognize the sacredness of life or pleasure or desire or sexuality as a result of this new belief system. And so I began to see the ways in which my soul had to heal from that in order to come into my true feminine power. So when I left, I started researching religious history and ancient civilizations and mythology to put that together with my own self-study of all of these deeply subconscious beliefs that were coming up, because our subconscious speaks to us through the emotional body. So I would understand something intellectually, like, that's not right that he's saying that or doing that, but I couldn't feel that in my body because my energy system and my subconscious, AKA my soul trauma, wasn't actually in alignment with what I thought I knew to be true for me, right? And so through that healing, I came into a really deep healing of my soul and began to activate my own sovereignty and reclaim my sovereignty through shifting not only my conscious beliefs, but my subconscious through my emotional body and through my energy system, and connecting to my body as a portal to my soul. which is what it is, which is why I call myself a soul embodiment guide. And so now I guide people to do that, to do that soul level healing, to create that freedom across lifetimes. And I could talk a lot more about that, but I'll stop there.
No, I love that, because I teach a whole class on sovereignty, right? And when you first bring up the word, what does sovereignty mean to you? 90% of the people in the room have this blank look of, I don't even know what that word means, because we think of sovereignty as the king and queen are sovereign, right? Royalty is sovereign, but what does sovereign truly mean? And probably about 6 or 7 years ago, that word came into my consciousness of, we all need to learn sovereignty here now. It's about being sovereign. And so when we really dive into sovereignty, people are like, well, I don't really know what that means. Well, it does mean freedom, right? But it also means responsibility and accountability as well, that we have to be accountable for what we do in this lifetime, for our actions. And so I find that people get lost sometimes in that sovereignty because there's two sides of it. Are you accountable for who you are and what you do and authentic? Right? Do you understand sovereignty gives you back your own power so that others can't take your power away? Like how people want us to be, how our parents want us to show up, where they want us to go in our education and how they want us to work and their belief systems and how those affect and influence us. That even that teacher in elementary school that looks down at that child and the child says, I want to be this when I grow up. And they go, you can't be that. Right? We don't realize how effective and influential all those things are. So to really dive deep into who we are, not only ancestrally, generationally, but also in this lifetime, to find out, what have we stuck in our subconscious of our beliefs? And I love the fact that I know it took courage and strength, because our mind tells us one thing, that ego is trying to keep us safe. Oh, you can't do that, Jessica. Jessica, that's not what you're supposed to do. You have a paycheck and you have a roof over your head. And what are you doing? To step into what you passionately believe in from your heart, I know that takes courage. So what do you tell people that have this block, this fear? Because there are people listening to this podcast that their soul is telling them something and they're like, no, we can't do that. No. How do you have that courage to move through that?
I would say here's the key. We have to stop looking at ourselves as 3D physical beings, because that was what shifted it for me, and what continues to allow me to live a magical life is that I do not identify as purely human. Now, if I were to identify as just a 3D physical being, that would also be saying I don't have a soul and I'm not divine, because the soul is our divinity. The soul is our eternal self here in form, right? And so when I see myself as a soul who chose to inhabit a body, who is actually eternal, which is actually invincible, then I can recognize that all that comes to me through my soul. Now, a lot of the work is also to distinguish soul versus ego, right? That's a lot of the inner work. But when I know it is deep soul truth and it is felt, it is known, it is in my bones, it is in my heart, it is coming to me. And I'm not honoring that. I'm denying the divine within me. And so I had to do the work to look at the ways I was denying the divine that I am. And that is a consistent process that I consistently guide my clients through, guide myself through. I don't teach anything I don't embody, because I serve through my connection to the divine, right? Otherwise, I'm serving through ego. And so we have to, in order to have courage, in order to break free of what I call a fear-based matrix of living, in order to break free and ascend, a lot of people call it spiritual ascension. It's through the body, and it's through your unification with your soul, with your divinity, that you ascend. It's not by going anywhere else. All of that's simply denial. It's another form of denial. And so we have to look at, okay, if I actually believe I'm divine, if I actually believe I have a soul, let's clear all the blockages to trusting that, to hearing that, to seeing that, to honoring that, to valuing that, to living that way in order to be sovereign. Because for me, sovereignty is, yes, all of those beautiful things that you stated. I think you said it beautifully. And what I like to focus on is soul sovereignty. Our body is formed by and contains the energy of our soul. So we can access past, present, parallel, future lifetimes through right now, which is why the now, which is why the present is so important, which is why the body is so important. When we learn how to access that voice of the soul through the body by working with our energy system, opening our channels, working with the subconscious mind through our emotional body, because our emotional body is so linked, right, to not only our soul, but our subconscious. Then when we learn how to access that and we work with that, everything we experience, for example, growing up, is just what our soul is coming in through from past life karma. So we are able to heal not only what was passed down to us from our parents, for example, we're able to heal the soul wound that created that parent in the first place in this lifetime. And we're able to get to the root. I'm all about getting to the root. Even as a prosecutor, it's like, let's get to the root, right? It's one of the reasons I left the system, because if we're just putting people in jail for committing crime over and over and over, but nobody's asking, why are you committing crime? How can I help you stop committing crime? What are we as a society doing? Criminal justice system is just a microcosm of the rest of society. So we as a society, we as individuals make up that society. We're the ones who have to change if we want to change anything else. And we get to the root of any soul traumas, any soul wounds, any ways we have separated from our divinity. We get to that root, we pull it out, we heal it, we come back in wholeness, which is ancient feminine power. It is the wholeness of you. It is your soul here embodied on earth.
I love that. I love that. And I feel that passion that you're bringing through, right? And what a beautiful time to be stepping into the divine feminine in the age of Aquarius, right? That's bringing that energy to the forefront, which is, I believe, causing all the breakdowns of lots of different things, right? In the physical reality world out there, because it's time for us to step in. Now, I'm not saying, here's what I believe. I believe there needs to be balance. Divine masculine, divine feminine. Within all of us, there needs to be balance. There needs to be balance in the world. But for centuries, long time, hundreds of years, we've been in that masculine energy for so long that we're learning or being forced, pushed, shoved to start to connect to that feminine energy, because I'm sure you've seen it with your clients. Lots of women have stepped into that masculine energy because that's what was expected. That's the survival instinct of I need to control, I need to, and the feminine energy is just as powerful as the masculine energy, right? We need both. We need that balance of both. And I think for many women, at least that I've seen in my lifetime, including myself, somewhere along the line, I let go of who I was to be more masculine, to work in a corporate environment as a woman, because that was a little bit of that expectation. So I love that we're coming into this time frame where we hopefully will get to that point where we'll see the strength that women bring to the table, and that it's just as important to have that divine feminine as it does to have the divine masculine. So you talk about magic, the magic of this power. So talk to us a little bit of your experience of the magic of the divine feminine and being sovereign.
Yeah, I first, in order to address that, I have to kind of respond to what you shared, because I don't think we've actually been in masculine energy. We've been in distorted energy. And as women, myself included, we were trying to be not in our divine masculine energy, because we don't really see that much in the world either. We were trying to be like a man, because only men were allowed to have power. And there's a difference, because divine masculine energy for me is not a limited demand. but it is actually our capacity to have the consciousness of the divine. And true divine masculine energy has been lacking on this planet for thousands of years, just as the divine feminine energy has been lacking on this planet.
I agree.
What we've actually been in is separation consciousness. And so the return, the reclamation of the feminine as divine is the return of union, because we've been in separation from both divine masculine and divine feminine, because the divine masculine as the consciousness of the divine merges with the divine feminine, our earth, our life, our body, our self. That is sacred union, in my opinion, my experience, what's been shown to me through my own embodiment. And what we're moving into is both the reclamation of the divine feminine and masculine, because we can't actually have one without the other, which is why we've just been in separation consciousness. The feminine literally can't exist without the masculine can't exist without the feminine. Just even on a physical level, if a man and woman are not procreating, unless we use artificial technology, there is no new life. Like there has to be a man and a woman birthing to create new life, right? Because we need the two in order for life to exist. And so the magic of that for me is kind of related to what I was starting to share earlier, is that when we bridge, right, our life, our body, our self with our divine consciousness, to me, that is the soul coming into full own, like the soul light then takes over, right? You bring your ego into alignment with your soul's truth. You start to live as the divine that you are, which creates magic, because the divine is love, divine love, not human love. That's a whole other story, but like divine love. And that divine love is creating magic. The magic being our interconnection with all of life, our interconnection with all elements, our interconnection with all things. So your frequency of the divine that you are, as you surrender into soul, then is what allows the divine within all things to support you, to come to you, to nourish you, because you've done the work to open up your receptive channels and to allow your soul to guide you, and you're trusting that intuition to take the action that is coming from a place of being, and right, all of this stuff that I know that you know, right? How we create magically. For me, it's required that I let go of how it's going to happen and just know it's already done, because I am sourced by source at all times, in all ways. And my source is my soul, right? Which is the divine. And so as I trust that, as I trust everything that my soul asks of me, even if it makes no sense, that's where the magic is.
I get that. Yeah. And I believe we've not been in divine masculine, but we've been in masculine energy. I also believe we've got a lot of people helping women step into the divine feminine. Unfortunately, I haven't seen anything out there helping men figure out what the divine masculine is. You don't see as much. And so they both got to come together for that sacred marriage at some point. And I believe each of us hold both of those energies. We're not just women and feminine. We also have a masculine. There's this connection within us of that sacred marriage to step into our divine divinity by holding both of those energies. We can't be more of one than the other. We have to have that balance that helps us in this lifetime or any lifetime. Because it's all about balance. It's all about polarity. It's all about both sides to have. We're either usually more water or earth and less fire, or more masculine or more feminine. And all of that is about balance. How do we have all that within balance and integration into nature and all living things in the universe? All that creates that balance. And I think that's what we're trying to come to have that space of being, of fully being in that space. And I feel like when we reach that, our personal aspirations or goals no longer have that drive for us because we want to step into what our soul wants, our divine soul. And some of this stuff that we've been taught of materialism and that sort of thing becomes unimportant because it's not important in our growth. It's not the house you own or the car you own or the title or the job. It's who you are inside. It's developing that part, right? And so I love the magic of stepping in and really trusting and following that. And it takes courage to do that, I'm sure, on many levels. So to see people step into that, I think that's amazing to get them. And you're talking about going on another pilgrimage, right? Of being open to say, hey, I don't know where this is going to lead me, where I'm going to end up at the end of this, but you know, I give you kudos because I think that takes real courage, and definitely growth along the way. I'm sure you also know that as well.
Yeah, and it's I'm going on the spiritual pilgrimage to Europe for 6 weeks, and I'm going to very ancient sites of the divine feminine, specifically to help bring that ancient wisdom into the modern world, how we access this remembrance of sacred union, how we access this remembrance of our sovereignty as women, how we access this remembrance of our divinity here in form, and work with that ancient medicine to help us, right, to do the soul level healing and activations. And, you know, maybe it doesn't make logical sense, right, to pack everything up and put it in storage and go on a pilgrimage for 6 weeks to follow the call of the goddess, but it doesn't have to make logical sense, right? Because it's a knowing. And part of it for me, the work, so much of my work, because particularly as women, but even as men, we are so conditioned not to trust our inner world, to give more authority to the outside world. Sovereignty is to source from within, to fully become your own authority. And I have done that. I continue to do that and embody that. And what that means is I trust my soul and its knowing and its desire more than what is reasonable. And to do that, I've also had to detach from the survival grid and the fear-based way of living that tells me how I should live and who I should be, which is not coincidentally the path of ancient feminine power. It's to release everything that's not your true self, right? To live as that. And it's releasing the ways that we have found safety externally, worth externally, power externally, value. Safety is a big one, right? We have to learn how to source safety from within to be sovereign. And because I've done that work, arduous work in many ways, because I didn't have really a lot of external guides. It was in the physical world, I have my spiritual guides, and my soul guiding me to pave this path for my soul, and ideally for others who want to follow that same path to sovereignty, to trust this no matter what, because it's trusting that I am divine. It's trusting the divine within me. It's trusting that this is what's eternal, not anything around me.
Right. Absolutely. You can't take it with you, right? None of this is going to go with you. Just the energies and memories that you've picked up within this lifetime. Share with us, Jessica, if people wanted to connect with you, work with you, and we'll have your website at the bottom of the video, how they can do that, what you offer for those that are listening that might want to connect.
Yeah. So the Soul Sovereignty and Sexuality Podcast, I do musings each week on various things. I will be specifically, while I'm in Europe, October through November, doing talks on these ancient feminine sites and divine feminine power and sovereignty related to those sites. My website's thepathtosovereignty.com, and Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, same. Well, I guess YouTube is actually the Soul Sovereignty and Sexuality Podcast. And I do a free gift for anyone who signs up for the weekly newsletter, which includes the podcast clips coming out. And I think I sent you a link for that. It's also on my website. And that right now is a heart activation. I might change it to a ritual of reclamation, which is an even deeper activation of divine feminine power. So either way, it'll be a really powerful activation.
I love that. I love your courage. I love I will have to listen on your journey as you go. Europe is on my bucket list to someday visit some of those beautiful sites, including the Cave of Mary Magdalene is something I would love to be able to do. So I'll follow you on your journey as you move through your sacred sites. Thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing your perspective with us.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure to talk with somebody who gets sovereignty and all the magic that can bring us in our lives, right? It's not always easy for the ego, but it really is the secret to magic. Magic that isn't contingent on anything, right? Like it's just how you live and breathe.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that. Thank you for those that listened. I hope you'll like, comment, and follow us on all the platforms or the platform that you prefer. We would love to really hear from you. Thank you for taking the time to watch or listen to this podcast. We appreciate you, and I hope you have a sacred and magical week.